I woke before 6 that morning, same as always, and drove downtown while the sky was still gray over Lake Erie. Whitmore and Cole Consulting occupied 4 floors of polished glass on Euclid Avenue, the kind of place where the coffee machine cost more than my first car. I badged in at 6:40, before the lobby lights had even finished their automatic dimming sequence. My name is Eleanor Ferris, though everyone in the building just called me Ellie. 67 years old, 22 years at that company, and I could still find any file in under a minute. I organized the executive folders that morning the same way I had 1,000 mornings before. Edges squared, tabs color-coded, nothing out of place. I did not know it yet, but by the end of that week, the entire 3rd floor would be sitting in silence, waiting on a decision that traced straight back to me. Nobody saw it coming. Not even me. The decision I did not see coming started with a man named Bradley Kessner, who walked onto the 3rd floor that Monday with a leather portfolio and a phrase he used constantly, modernizing our workflow. He was maybe 40, sharp suit, the kind of handshake that lasted a half-second too long. Within 2 weeks he had renamed 3 departments and canceled the Friday coffee cart, calling it a legacy expense. The Meridian account had been mine since 2011. I built the reporting templates myself, learned every quirk of that client by hand, and never once missed a renewal deadline. So when Bradley called a Tuesday morning meeting and announced that Tyler Grissom would be taking over Meridian effective immediately, I sat there with my pen still in my hand, waiting for him to say my name too. He never did. Tyler was 26. Good kid, actually, though he came to my desk that same afternoon asking where the client contact sheets were kept. Bradley caught me organizing the handoff binder later that week and said, in front of the whole floor, "We appreciate the old-school approach, Ellie, but Meridian needs someone who thinks digitally now." A few people glanced up from their monitors. Nobody said anything. I nodded, said that's fine, and kept stacking the binder pages in order, corners aligned, the way I always did. My hands did not shake. I made sure of that. What Bradley did not know, what none of them knew, was that I had already sent an email to HR 2 days earlier, a simple request for something most employees never think to ask for. I did not mention it to anyone. I just kept working, kept smiling at Tyler when he asked his questions, and kept waiting to see exactly how far this modernizing was going to go. Oh. The waiting ended on a Thursday, 3 weeks after Tyler took over Meridian. I got a calendar invite at 9 in the morning, no subject line, just a room number and a time, 10:30, HR conference room B. I remember thinking that was fast for a company that usually took 2 weeks to approve a supply order. Diane Okafor from HR was already sitting there when I walked in, along with Bradley, a folder between them, and a box of tissues pushed to the side of the table like they'd used that room for this exact purpose before. Diane slid a single sheet toward me. Effective immediately, it said, due to performance concerns and organizational restructuring. I asked which performance concerns specifically. Diane looked at Bradley. Bradley looked at his phone. "We're an at-will employer, Ellie," he said, like that answered the question. Diane added that they wouldn't be able to discuss severance today, that someone from payroll would follow up. I asked when. She said she wasn't sure. They let me clean out my desk with a security guard named Marcus standing 3 feet away. Arms crossed, not unkind about it, just doing his job. I packed 22 years into one cardboard box. My stapler. A photo of my grandson at his graduation. The good pen Tyler had actually asked to borrow just that morning. Tyler caught me near the elevator bank, glanced at Marcus, then at me and said quietly that this wasn't right, that everyone on the floor knew it wasn't right. Nobody else said a word. A few people kept their eyes on their monitors like the carpet pattern had suddenly become fascinating. The elevator doors opened and I stepped halfway in, then stopped and looked back down that long row of cubicles one more time. Not out of anger. Not even out of sadness, really. I was thinking about that email I'd sent HR 2 days before any of this started, the one nobody in that building had bothered to ask me about yet. The doors closed before anyone had the chance to. Down in the lobby, I stopped by the front desk before walking out for good. I asked the receptionist, a young man named Caleb, if he could email me a copy of my complete personnel file, my write-ups if there were any, and my termination letter for my own records. I told him, calm as anything. He said sure, no problem, and didn't think twice about it. What Caleb didn't notice was the manila folder already tucked inside my tote bag. The corner just visible. A return address printed along the top that wasn't from any doctor's office. That return address belonged to a law office on Prospect Avenue, though nobody at Whitmore and Cole would learn that for another 11 days. The letter arrived on a Wednesday, addressed to the General Counsel's office, and somehow found its way to Bradley's desk by that afternoon anyway. I heard about it later secondhand, the way most of that building's real news traveled. Bradley read it standing up at first, then sat down slowly, the way you do when a chair suddenly feels necessary. The letter used phrases like wrongful termination and age discrimination under federal law, and referenced something called a right to sue letter that could come from the EEOC if the matter wasn't resolved directly. He called it a nuisance claim to Diane that same afternoon, loud enough that 2 people near the copier heard him say it. Every company gets these, he told her. Our legal team eats this for breakfast. But by Friday, something had shifted in the break room conversations. Someone mentioned that the woman who got let go, the older one, Ellie, apparently had a lawyer already lined up, and faster than anyone expected for someone who barely used the printer without help. Tyler heard 2 of the senior managers talking quietly near the elevators, using a phrase that hadn't come up yet in any of this, something about her background, something none of them could quite place. Bradley picked up his phone that Friday afternoon, already dialing legal, already rehearsing how he'd frame it as nothing worth their time. He had no idea yet whose name was about to come up in that conversation. The name that came up was mine, though not the version of me anyone at Whitmore and Cole had ever met. Legal counsel pulled the attorney's letter and found the signature line first. A name Bradley didn't recognize, David Ferris and Okonkwo Law. My son. Then came the second surprise. Buried in the letter's opening paragraph, the line where the firm described their client's professional background. Before Whitmore and Cole, before the filing and the folders and the color-coded tabs, I had spent 2 decades as a senior compliance officer handling EEOC cases for a healthcare network in Columbus, until my husband's diagnosis pulled me out of that career entirely. I hadn't just noticed the violations happening around me those last few months. I had logged them the way I was trained to: dates, direct quotes, names of who was standing nearby when Bradley made his comments about old-school thinking. Legal counsel read that section twice before setting the letter down. Bradley asked what it meant. She didn't explain it further in that meeting. She didn't need to. By Monday, outside counsel had reviewed the full file and given Whitmore and Cole's leadership a number nobody wanted to say out loud, an estimate of what a formal EEOC investigation could cost the company. Not just in settlement but in the 18 months of discovery, depositions, and the kind of local news coverage that shows up when a search committee later Googles your company name. The board called an emergency session. Bradley wasn't invited to that one. Someone on the board, a woman named Patricia Voss, reportedly asked a single question that made its way around the office by Tuesday morning. She asked why a 22-year employee with a spotless file had been the one person let go during a restructuring that kept every manager under 45. Nobody had a good answer. By Wednesday, Bradley's modernization initiative had quietly disappeared from the intranet homepage. Tyler mentioned to me later that people started talking differently in the break room, not about Meridian accounts or quarterly targets, but about me wondering out loud if they'd said enough, done enough back when it mattered. Diane from HR, the same woman who had slid that termination sheet across the table without blinking, was the one who finally called me that Thursday afternoon. I was standing in my kitchen in Lakewood drying a coffee mug when my phone rang with a Cleveland number I hadn't seen in 11 days. I let it ring twice before I picked up. Diane's voice sounded different than it had in that conference room, quieter, careful in a way she hadn't bothered with when she slid that paper across the table. She said the company wanted to offer full reinstatement, my old position, my old desk, effective immediately if I wanted it. I told her I'd think about it, though I already knew what my answer would be. What I did accept was the rest of it, full back pay for the 11 weeks, a formal settlement my son reviewed line by line, and a written acknowledgement on company letterhead that my termination had violated federal age discrimination protections. Bradley left the company 2 weeks later. Nobody announced it loudly, just a short note on the intranet about him pursuing other opportunities. Whitmore and Cole rolled out mandatory age discrimination training for every manager, along with a new HR review process for any termination involving an employee over 55. I went back once just to collect the last of my things properly this time, no cardboard box, no Marcus standing guard. Tyler met me at the elevator and actually hugged me, said he'd thought about that day at the elevator bank more than he probably should have. Diane apologized twice, unprompted, the second time with her voice catching slightly. At my old desk, someone had left a small brass nameplate propped against the monitor. My name spelled correctly 22 years, it read underneath. Nobody had asked me if I wanted it there. I decided I did. And I decided something else too, sitting in that same chair a few weeks later. I took part of the settlement and started a small scholarship fund through a local workforce center in Lakewood, aimed at workers over 55 going back to school or switching careers, the way I once had to. Diane, of all people, asked to help me set up the paperwork. Last month I sat across from a woman named Carol, 62, laid off after 19 years, filling out her first application. I told her the same thing I wish someone had told me, that being underestimated is not the same as being wrong. I still think about that Tuesday morning at the elevator, the doors closing on all those quiet faces. None of them knew yet who they were dealing with. Now I wonder, if you were in that room that day, would you have said something?